Next month, I will be taking the Disco on a big trip to Greece. In case you didn't know, Greece is full of steep mountain roads and it can get pretty hot over there. Temperatures can exceed 35 degrees, so the Disco will have to turn these big tires, the AC, and a fair bit of load in the back over some steep mountain roads. This is a trip that is hard for a new car, let alone one that is now 30 years old. So in order to ensure I'm not stranded on the side of the road with a bunch of steam coming out of the bonnet, I have done a lot of work under the hood, but also in the interior and in the transmission and transfer box areas to prepare this car for a demanding trip like one in Greece. In this video, I will be walking you through exactly what I have done to this car to ensure it is reliable. So stay tuned. The list of things I have done under here is quite extensive, so I will have to have a look at my notes every once in a while to ensure I don't forget everything. The first and biggest thing I have changed under here is the whole engine. I have swapped it from one made by Toyota. No, I'm just kidding. There is no way I would get rid of the 300 TDI. This is a great engine, just as long as you don't ask too much out of it, which tends to be the case for all engines. But in any case, the largest thing I have changed in here is the radiator, the largest and perhaps the most important one. The old one wasn't leaking or anything, but it was really old. The water inside the cooling system was very rusty and very dirty, so the water wasn't probably flowing as good as it could. The fins were also dented, so air couldn't pass through the radiator as efficiently as it needs to. Also, the fact that this is a new radiator gives me some more peace of mind that it's not going to leak or fail while I'm on my trip. Now, right behind the radiator, I have changed the viscous coupling to ensure it turns on and off whenever needed, to ensure that the big fan in here works when it needs to and keeps the engine cool. From there on, moving to the side, right here on the 300 TDI, we have the water pump. I have also replaced the water pump. I have used the AirTech one. I tried to use as good of parts as I could to make sure that this thing works as efficiently as possible. One thing I should add is that in Cyprus, the climate is even hotter than Greece, so everything I have done is to ensure that the car works well while I'm home and also when I'm going out on trips. So this isn't just for Greece, this is me actually taking care of this car and making sure that it won't have any issues during summer when I'm at home or when I'm away. Now, right above the water pump, this was perhaps the biggest job of this whole cooling system rebuild. As you can see, we have new hoses, a new steel hose that goes back to new heater hoses that go all the way down into the cabin. The heater matrix on my Discovery was deleted. This is a common thing to do on these cars because the heater matrix leaks and it leaks water inside the cabin, and to take out the heater matrix you have to pull some stuff off the dashboard. In case you're wondering, you do not have to remove the whole dashboard, you just remove some panels from underneath and you can remove the matrix from the side. This is something not many people know, but you can definitely do it that way. And this is exactly what I have done. The Discovery now has a heater, not because I need a heater in Greece, but because I wanted to ensure that the cooling system of the Discovery is complete. The heater matrix, if you have a look at it, is a small radiator, so I'm pretty sure it does help with the efficiency of the whole cooling system. It's not just there to be used as a heater. I think it is there as a part of the whole cooling system. And in case the engine gets a bit warm, you can turn on the heater and use the heater matrix as a second radiator. So it is kind of a backup plan just in case the TDI gets a bit toasty. So that has been done. All the pipes are from our original Land Rover pipes. In case you're wondering, they are the same part number as a Discovery 2. So if you are trying to find heater matrix pipes for a Discovery 1 and you can't, it is because you have to search in the Discovery 2 parts. This is true for Island 4x4, which is where I buy all my parts from. I'm not sponsored by them, but I love that website. It is a bit old, but the prices are amazing and the shipping is great. While I was in here, I have also changed the P gasket, which is a common failure on the 300 TDI engines. It tends to leak, and you upgrade the P gasket with the steel one, which seals much nicer than the original paper gasket. I have also changed most of the water hoses. There are a few that I haven't changed, but they still look fine, so I left them. The coolant tank has also been replaced, and I have changed the thermostat for the coolest thermostat I could find. So what I mean by the coolest is the thermostat that opens up at the lowest temperature possible. I can't exactly remember the temperature. I think it is 74 degrees or 78, I'm not sure, but it is the coolest one I could find, which enables the water to circle through the engine a bit quicker and therefore keeping it cooler. I think that the earlier you can open up the thermostat, the better. Of course, the engine still needs to be within operating temperature. We don't want the temp of the engine to always be low, but from a certain point and onwards, the earlier you can open up the thermostat, I think the best, because you start cooling down the engine before it gets too hot. Finally, I have done a pretty extensive flush of the fluids in here. Since everything was off, I got the hose, the garden hose with some pressure on it, and went through all of the openings I could find. I have changed the radiator fluid twice now because I had to take some stuff apart and I lost the radiator fluid that I had put in the first time. So it has been flushed twice. I have cleaned it with the hose, and the water now is looking clean in there. No rust, no huge chunks to get stuck in the water passageways. So the cooling system is pretty much fully rebuilt, and if I keep everything sensible, it shouldn't have any overheating issues. Right now we are at roughly 1300 to 1400 meters of elevation. It is a 37-degree day today down at sea level. Up here it's more like 20 degrees. But it is as hot as it can get, in my opinion. And coming up here is roughly a 30-minute full-on uphill drive in the sun. And I didn't have any overheating issues. Last summer, if I did the same thing at the same road with these temperatures, I would definitely get some issues. The temperature used to climb up a bit in these situations, but today everything was fine, and I was going up at the speed of the traffic, so I wasn't holding anyone back. I was revving it quite hard to do so, but I wanted to test it to ensure it is fine. One further thing I want to add to the whole cooling system, which isn't really related to the cooling system, but it does help the engine stay cooler, is that I removed the big center muffler from the exhaust. Now, some friends of mine told me that that makes a huge difference. I wasn't too sure of the difference it makes, but I thought I would do everything possible to help this thing breathe nicely and stay cool. I removed the muffler. It has made a huge difference down low, so this thing pulls much nicer from down low on uphill sections, and because the exhaust gases can be pushed through more easily, the exhaust gas temperatures are lower, which helps the engine stay cooler. And because the engine has more power down low, I don't have to rev it as much. It doesn't have to struggle as much, so there is a less likelihood of it overheating. So this is pretty much everything overheating related. I have also done a few other bits. I've changed some of the steel pipes and stuff, but those aren't all that interesting. I did manage to forget something, even though I had my phone with me. One last point I wanted to mention was that I did tweak the fuel pump and the turbo to get some more power out of this thing, which I do believe helps it work cooler. The 300 TDI is very detuned from the factory. You can do a lot to it to get some more power out of it, and when you do so, it gets stressed less because you don't have to go full throttle everywhere. What I have done is the classic fuel pump tune, which is turning the boost pin around. I have gave it a bit of fuel. I will actually link a video in the description just in case you want to see exactly what I have done. It is from another channel, but it is a great video. And I have also shortened the wastegate on the turbo. Now instead of 1 bar of boost, it works at up to 1.2 to 1.3. This is still very safe for the 300 TDI, and I rarely ever take it up there. I only do when it is absolutely needed. So yeah, in addition to the cooling system, I also got a bit more power out of this thing to ensure it works a bit more relaxed, let's say. Now, moving under the vehicle, I cannot really get under it, so I'm going to stay here, but I'm going to add footage of what I'm saying. Moving on under the vehicle, I have, since I've bought this car, there has been an ongoing fight between me and the transfer box. Ever since I got it, the transfer box has been leaking. At the start, I thought that it was the big inspection plate underneath. I have resealed that thing twice and it never stopped leaking. For the first year and a half, the leak wasn't too big, so I didn't really care about it. I just left it there and added oil every once in a while. However, during the past couple of months, the leak has gotten pretty big, and if I left it as it was, I would have been stressing over it while I was in Greece, because you never really know how much oil it has in it when it's leaking. You never really know when the seal decides to just let go and start pissing oil all over the place. So I thought, rather than having the stress while I'm on my trip, I would be much better off if I fixed the problem. Now, I had 2 attempts to fix the problem. The first attempt was a bit of a bodge repair, and I paid for it later because I had to do everything again. At a closer inspection, the leak of my transfer box came from the IMS shaft O-ring. The IMS shaft is basically a shaft that goes across the transfer box, and that shaft holds the intermediate shaft bearings and the gears, and at each end of that shaft you have 2 O-rings. Now, because of the load on those O-rings, as the years progress, the transfer boxes tend to leak from there, and to replace those O-rings, you've guessed it, you have to remove the whole transfer box. Of course, being the real and the authentic Land Rover owner I am, I never take this thing to a garage. I fix it at home, and at home I don't really have a big lift or any way to remove something heavy like the transfer box. So what I did was I replaced all the transfer box bolts, the ones that are behind, with longer ones. I disconnected everything and pulled the transfer box back far enough to the point that I was able to push the shaft through and replace the O-ring. It took me roughly half a day to a full day to do this. I replaced the O-ring, but sadly the O-ring I put in was a bit too thick. So when I pushed the intermediate shaft back inside the transfer box, the O-ring got destroyed. Of course, I didn't know that because I couldn't see in there. I bolted everything back up and took it for a test drive. And surprise, surprise, it was leaking again, and it was leaking more than it used to. And on top of the leaking, the transfer box was now also whining. Why was it whining? Because in the intermediate shaft you have a crash washer which sets the load on the bearings, and that crash washer technically shouldn't be reused, but I thought it's a Land Rover, it wasn't really a precision piece of engineering anyway, so I didn't think it would hurt it. But as it turns out, it did, because it was whining, it was leaking, and I couldn't just leave it like this because I would have been thinking about it all the time while I was driving the car. I would have been stressing about it. So thankfully, a good friend of mine came back from England just a day before I decided to take the transfer box out, and he came over. He gave me a hand to remove the thing because it is a bit heavy. We removed it together, opened it up, pushed the intermediate shaft out, replaced the bearings with new Timken ones. I replaced the crash washer, put everything back together, added 2 high pressure and high temperature O-rings, a lot of silicone to make sure it doesn't leak again, and silicone also cushions the intermediate shaft. It's actually a good thing to put silicone on there, because sometimes the intermediate shaft can make the hole of the transfer case go oval, because the IMS shaft is made of steel and the transfer case is made of aluminium, so the aluminum is less tough from the steel and it makes the case go oval. Thankfully this didn't happen on mine, but putting a bit of silicone there does help cushion the forces and prevent the transfer case from getting destroyed, basically. So we changed the 2 bearings of the IMS shaft, put everything back on, we replaced the input seal. The other 2 seals on the drive shafts were already replaced from before, so I left those as they were. We put the transfer box back inside, and now there is no leaking and there is no whining. I do have the dreaded Land Rover clunk, and it is quite pronounced on my transfer box, but I can't really do anything for that right now. It needs pullers, and it is a bit more of an extensive job to rebuild that part of the transfer box, but I think for now it is going to be fine. So this is pretty much all the work I have done so far. Before I go, I will take the wheel bearings apart to regrease them and to check them. I will also take some wheel bearings with me, which brings me to the point that I will be filming a video of the spares and the tools I will take with me on this trip, so stay tuned for that one as well. In the interior, I changed the speakers just to have some good music playing while I'm on the trip, and that's about it pretty much. These are very simple cars if you take care of them. If you know the limitations of some of their parts, they tend to be very reliable. If you're planning on doing a similar trip and have any questions regarding preparing your Disco, your Defender, or any other car pretty much. At this point I should mention that I started preparing the Land Cruiser for the trip, but then I decided to prepare the Disco because I wanted to go with the Disco. So I prepared 2 cars for the trip. But in any case, I've learned a lot, so if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I hope this video was helpful, and if it was, please consider subscribing. I'll see you on the next one.